quite literally, hello? Okay, hello? Okay, quite literally, nobody asked for this, but if I have the plot of The Teacher by Frieda McFadden in my brain, then I think everybody else has to as well, because I cannot be the only one to have to suffer. I'm just saying. So, quick little roundup. So I kept seeing on TikTok, Frieda McFadden this, Frieda McFadden that. I heard like Manon from Cat's Eye was reading a Frieda McFadden book. I literally went into it knowing nothing. I didn't even know that she was writing psychological thrillers. I'm like, it's only when I started reading it that I realised. And I kind of just went on and like picked a random one. So I think what I was supposed to pick was The Housemaid, which I have read. Probably will do another video on that one. But the one I ended up reading first, so my first introduction to Frieda McFadden, I just realised, let me turn the light on. Okay, that's better. So my first introduction to Frieda McFadden, The Teacher. So that's what this is about. So like quick, like let me come a little closer. It's a little cold, actually. It's a little bit cold. It's a little bit cold here. Anyway, okay, let me just shut that actually, because it's actually cold. Okay, so essentially, I'm just gonna give a quick little recap onto like what the book's even about. So basically, there's a girl, her name's Addie, and she's a student at this school, and like nobody really likes her, and she's kind of ostracized. But that's because there's been a rumor going around that she was romantically involved with a teacher who was fired as a result. And then you also have the perspective of Eve and Nate Bennett, who are a married couple who both work at the school. Eve is like a paranoid maths teacher, and her husband is supposed to be the handsome English teacher, and she's always paranoid that he's like on these late nights at work and stuff like that, and like every like girl at the school crushes on him. And then obviously Frieda McFadden, she writes psychological thrillers, and one thing she's known for is like crazy plot twists, and you never really know like what's happening, and when you think you know, you're either probably wrong or you're close and you don't really fully know. That's what I found in both my experience with both of the Frieda McFadden books that I have currently read. I'm also thinking of reading Never Lie, although one of my friends read it and said it wasn't that good and she wasn't that satisfied. But then again, I wasn't that satisfied with The Teacher either. I think The Housemaid definitely better. But I'm gonna go in. Let's break it down a little bit. Okay, so we open up with the book with some random person digging a grave. We don't know who it is. They never tell you at this point who it is. We just know that they're digging the grave. And then you go into the next chapter and we find out it's like 3 months earlier. And so it's the first day of school. Even Nate Bennett, maths teacher, English teacher, they're gonna go back to school, and there's like the whole lot of discourse about, to be honest, it's so whiny. This is from Eve's perspective, by the way, but so whiny, like talking about like how like she's supposed to be the plain one and nobody understands like why like Nate would want to marry her, because he's like, even though he's older, he's like the hot teacher and she's not, and she's got this weird shoe obsession. Basically there's just a lot of like repetition about these random things. I'm just like, okay, we get it, she's shoe obsessed, we get it, he's supposed to be hot, all the girls crush on him, she's supposed to be like the mean maths teacher, like we understand like how many times you have to tell us. But then we also get Adeline's perspective. I'm sorry, also the amount of times I had to hear this. She doesn't like to be called Adeline, she likes to be called Addie. Okay, but essentially she doesn't want to go back to school because of the whole drama where there's a rumor going around that she was romantically involved with one of the older maths teachers, and he was like fired or he had to resign or like something, because like apparently they were like having an affair or whatever. There's a couple other key players that I want to introduce. One is Eve's, like a Eve, who else am I introduced? Not Eve, Addie. See, I'm getting confused. Addie's ex-best friend, his name's Hudson Jawakowski. He basically has a really complicated name, but they also have a complicated relationship because they're like no longer friends. And then like the mean girl of the school, and her name is Kenzie. There are some other key, like other players, but I wouldn't say they're super key. And I'm trying to give like a quick summary of what happened, not a full summary. If you want a full summary, read the book, listen to it on Audible, listen to it on Spotify. I don't know. Also, can we please talk about how you only get 15 hours of audiobook listening time a month with Spotify Premium? Are you joking? On top of that, I heard about how the capitalists are milking us for all we're worth, because I'm paying £11.99 for that Spotify Premium, so I can skip some songs because I can't listen to a song for like more than 5 seconds, and to listen to 15 hours of audiobooks, which is like literally like 1.5 books, maybe 2 if you're reading like shorter books. But then I found out from some of my colleagues who are like not born in England and they travel back and forth and their permanent residence is technically not in this country. One of my colleagues is literally paying £2 a month for Spotify Premium. Sorry, I've gone on a caveat here. Also, they pay £15 for Amazon Prime whole year. I pay 95. They pay £5 for like the most top tier, £5 a month for the most top tier Netflix, whereas we're paying like what, like £15-16. Are you joking? I told you the capitalists are really coming to get us. But I get it. I suppose you got to do what you got to do. Anyway, back to the book. So basically, Kenzie's being a mean girl. Hudson's not really talking to Addie. Addie is wallowing in self-pity, but I guess it is what it is. Eve wallows in even more self-pity and nobody really knows why, but the basically relationship between Eve and Nate doesn't appear to be very good. Like, it just seems like they're married but unhappily. Like, it is just what it is. But then eventually Addie's in both of their classes and Addie hates Eve like with a passion. She's like, oh, the old maths teacher was so helpful, the one that she had the affair with. And then the English teacher, aka Nate, he's so like nice to her and like supportive and stuff like that, and she starts kind of like finding comfort in him, and she like likes to write poems, and he just like understands her and feels right, and like slowly basically Nate's just helping her with like getting by in her school life. Like, if something goes wrong, he lets her go home. He's like really gassing her about her poems. He's like telling her to join the poetry club or the poetry magazine, whatever. In the meantime, Eve is like, she pretty much hates Addie because she liked the old maths teacher and thought that he was really helpful, and she doesn't believe really that anything happened, and she thinks that Addie is like basically a snake or like something like that. And then she actually sees the old maths teacher in the grocery store, and he's not having a good time, but also he basically says to her, you need to be careful, Addie is troubled. Yes, she's troubled, because basically what had happened was, the reason that this whole thing with the old teacher went down was Addie was found by a neighbour like walking around, like sneaking around the old maths teacher's house, and had called the police. And then the police were like, oh, like, what is a student doing at her teacher's house? And so then they just made all these connections and thought that he was like taking advantage of her or sleeping with her or like grooming her, something, because she's like 16 years old. So there's that whole thing. But then what we're actually moving on to, by the way, this whole time Eve's wallowing in self-pity, her husband doesn't love her, la la la, she's having an affair with the shoe store salesman. His name is Jay. Just remember that for later, okay, because it's very important. But anyway, again with the stupid shoes. But we're getting to the crux of the story now. Essentially what happens is Nate actually starts having an affair with I wouldn't really call it that. He was essentially grooming Addie, and they start getting like a little crazy in the school's dark room. And he like writes her a poem and it's like, oh, this is about you. And then one day he's like, you brought me my spark back, like this is for you, la la. Then one day Kenzie, when she's bullying Addie, she sees the poem and she's like, where'd you get this? And Addie's like, I don't know, I just copied it from somewhere. Anyway, in the meantime, Eve's so self-absorbed anyway that she thinks that Addie is like basically she sees Addie like around their house, and now she thinks that Addie's obsessed with her and is like trying to get revenge on her because she's not she doesn't like her as maths teacher. Luckily for Nate, Eve is so self-absorbed that she hasn't put two and two together, and that there's two teachers who live at that house, and the reason Addie's there is because she is obsessed with Nate because he is grooming her. And then so she like goes and tells the principal, but Addie denies because Nate tells her deny everything, deny whatever they say, deny it, don't speak a single truth. But then what happens is that eventually one of the other teachers helps Eve put two and two together, and then Eve, well, not really, she says, oh, like maybe she isn't obsessed with you, but she's like stalking your husband. So then she goes to tell Nate, like, oh, you need to be careful. But when she does, what does she see? She sees Nate and Addie kissing in the classroom at school. Shock, horror, could not even imagine. Anyway, so then she's like, what? So then she's like blowing her like lid and whatever, and when they get home, she basically like kicks off and starts shouting at him, and he has to leave the house. But then, and that she says she's going to tell the police and she's going to tell like all these people, but then she's like, actually she doesn't want to ruin at this point she started feeling sympathetic to the girl that was groomed. So she was like, I don't want to ruin her life, so let me just tell him like, you can't teach students and stuff like that, like I won't tell the principal, but you need to resign, you need to move, you can't teach students from now on, we're going to have a divorce, you're going to give me the house, that kind of stuff. She's giving an ultimatum, otherwise she's going to go to the police and the principal. I can't believe that I completely forgot to mention the fact that the reason that this is so jarring to Eve, aside from the fact that he's doing this to a child, is that this is how they met. He was her English teacher and told her that he was her soulmate all those years ago. And now she's just clocked like he's doing this to other people, like other kids, other girls. It's sick. It's honestly sick. So then he's like, okay, whatever, and he tells Addie, but then he's basically saying to Addie like, oh, he like says like kind of in a subtle way like, oh, maybe we should kill her. The only way she's gonna stop is if we kill her. And then Addie's like, no, let me go talk to her. So she talked to her, trespassing. She breaks and enters into the house. She goes there. Eve's like, what the hell? And then basically Eve's like trying to talk Addie down because Addie's getting really like irritated when Eve is telling her, look, he's grooming you, you haven't done anything wrong, but you need to be careful, like Nate's not who you think he is, like all of that. And then Addie, again troubled, getting super agitated, hits Eve in the head, I believe with the frying pan, and like basically knocks her out. Pause for the story because I think they need to add a little something that I may have missed, or it may have come up at this part of the book, I can't really recall. But essentially, all we know is that Addie doesn't like her dad. Her dad died like last year. That's when all the troubles and stuff started happening, and that's why the old math teacher was helping her out because they felt bad for her. But essentially what happened is her dad was like a drunk, abusive, all of that kind of stuff. So she was like, oh, whatever. Then we find out that this is actually one of the reasons why her and Hudson aren't friends anymore, is because the reason she was friends with Hudson originally is because Hudson was also having troubles with his dad when he was younger, because his dad was like a migrant. And like he couldn't speak English that well, and like he was a janitor at the school, and Hudson was basically getting bullied for it, and Addie was the only one who was like being friends with him and like really understood. But anyway, one day Hudson and Addie go back to her house after school, like they always do, or like whatever, and they're just studying. Then the dad comes in and he's like cussing like everyone out left, right and center, and getting angry. And then something happens, and basically Addie pushes him down the stairs, and because he's drunk, he's like basically is unconscious. Instead of calling the police like Hudson originally wanted, she's like, no, we need to leave, we need to get out of here. So they go to Hudson's house. Then her mom comes home like whenever, like an hour later or whatever, and finds the dad dead at the bottom of the stairs. So essentially Addie killed her dad, and Hudson was there and saw it. And so after that they couldn't be friends, because Hudson was like, I can't. Also Hudson's now like popular and stuff, whatever, because he's like a quarterback or something, I don't know, something to do with American football, I never understand that. Anyway, and so that all that's going on, so that's why they're not really friends. And now cut back to the story where she's just hit Eve, the maths teacher, in the head with the frying pan. Then she calls Nate from Eve's phone and basically just tells him what she's done. And then he quickly comes back from the motel he was staying at, and then he's like, and then he's like, okay, we need to get rid of the body, go upstairs and get these sheets, whatever. So she goes up against the sheets. Then we skip to Eve's, I think is it Eve's perspective or Nate's perspective? I can't remember. I think it might be Eve's perspective. Or maybe it's Nate's. Anyway, someone's perspective we skip to that's either Eve or Nate. As you may have noticed, Eve is not actually dead. So she's kind of waking up and she's kind of groggy because she's been hit in the head. And she's like, what the hell's happening? And then she's Nate and she goes, Nate, we need to call the police. Addie's crazy. Then, like, first he pretends like he doesn't really understand what's going on. And then, boom, she clicks on. He doesn't know what's going on. And then he basically tries to kill her again. And so now he's strangling her. And then Addie comes down and she's like, she's moved. And then he's like, oh yeah, I thought it'd be easier for us to like wrap her in the sheet over here. And she's like, oh okay. And then she notices some marks on her neck and she's like, sure they weren't there before, but she doesn't say anything. Anyway, then they concoct a plan where they're gonna, Addie has to, even though she doesn't have a driver's license, naughty, she has to drive, even though this is probably the least of the crimes that she's committing. She has to drive Eve's car to the train station to make it look like Eve has decided to leave the city and visit her parents, and Nate buys a ticket using Eve's card and Eve's phone to corroborate that story. Then once they've done that, they drive to this pumpkin patch in like the middle of nowhere. It's a abandoned pumpkin patch. I don't want to scare all the Halloween lovers out there. And essentially they're going to dig a grave, and then he's like, come on. And all of a sudden, by the way, Nate's being super mean because I think he's now realised that it's like him or Addie, and he doesn't want to like obviously get done for it. So he's essentially creating an alibi for himself, but not for Addie. But Addie hasn't clocked on yet. So he's like, get digging. She's like, I don't want to. And then he's like, we have to. You killed her. And then so start digging, whatever. They dig the hole. You know what? This man has the audacity to say, get in the hole, to Addie. And she's like, I ain't getting in the hole. And he's like, yes, you are. You killed her. We need to see if she fits in. Anyway, she doesn't actually end up doing that. And then they put her in there, and then he's like, oh snap, I left her purse in the car, I'm gonna go and get it. And she's like, okay, I'll come with you. And he's like, who's gonna fill the hole? You crazy? So then she's like, okay. So then she starts filling the hole, and then he's gone for a while, and she's like, the car wasn't that far away. So then she quickly just like covers the remainder of the hole with leaves, and then she like goes after, and then she realizes, I'm sure the car wasn't this far away. Man's gone, tire tracks and all, yeah, he's off. So she's like, oh flip, what do I do? So she like walks for a bit, then she finds signal, and who does she call? After Nate, of course, who is not answering her phone. I believe he blocks her, to be honest. By the way, they've been communicating on this app called Snap Flash, which is basically like Snapchat, where the messages disappear and stuff like that, and that's where they were like doing their little risky like planning calls, messages, like pictures, that kind of thing. So then she calls Hudson. Hudson answers the phone, to her surprise, but he does answer, and she's like, I need your help. And then he's like, what? And then, but he doesn't ask too many questions. He picks it up, he knows something's wrong, but he doesn't pry. He drops her back off at her house. And then we cut to like Nate's perspective, and we find out like he's doing his part as the like really upset husband, and he's like called the police and said like la la la, like my wife's missing, like la la la, I don't know where she is, like nobody knows where she is, like all of this. And then he basically is dubbing Addie in by like saying like, oh, there was an incident at the school, you can go and ask the principal, my wife Eve thought that the student called Addie was stalking her, and there's this letter which is like a really threatening evil hate letter, but it was an English assignment that he had given to Addie, and so he was just reusing that against her. But this police officer is like a bit sus, so she's doing all her investigation. At the same time, I would like to say that muddy shoes just keep appearing at random places in the house, very scary, and sometimes with pieces of pumpkin on them. And then we get to this point where he's like, well, Addie would never do that, and Eve's dead, and there's only one other person who knows. And we're like, what the hell? Then we cut to, by the way, at this point, Addie is still denying everything. The police are questioning her. She has kind of realised, of course she must have, that Nate is like dubbing her in, but she also still has that whole deny thing going on in her head. So she's not saying nothing, even though the police officer is suspicious, and she's like, you can tell me anything, like doing all of that. And then guess who turns up at the door? Not the police officer, Kenzie, the bully. She turns up at Addie's door. Addie's like, what the hell? And then she's like, can I talk to you? And then she's like, not really, because you bullied me. And then she's like, come on. So anyway, They do that, and then basically Mackenzie, is her name Mackenzie? I don't know. They call her Kenzie. Kenzie essentially reveals that she's like, he didn't write that poem for you. Do you know where this is going? I'm sure you do. She's like, what do you mean? He goes, he wrote that. I know that you. Basically, she says, I know you are having a relationship with Mr. Bennett, and she's like, listen, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. Like, I literally know. And Addie's like, oh, like thinking that, oh, they saw her. She's like, no, it was the poem. I saw the poem. She was like, he wrote that poem about me. Yes, about Kenzie. She goes, yeah, he basically started grooming her when she was 14. So now they're 16. And that's why she's been mean to not Eve. I'm getting all the names confused. Addie this whole time. Because the reason that her and Mr. Bennett, Nate, were not having their little sexual relationship anymore is because there was the rumor going around that Addie was having a relationship with the other teacher who got fired, so they needed to be more careful. So then Kenzie was all like sad girl vibes, and she was like, no, I don't like you, I'm gonna make your school life like living hell. And then she's like, Addie's like, oh, I thought you were going out with Hudson. She's like, no, me and Hudson are just friends. Anyway, she's like, can you come with me to the police station because I don't want to be the only one. So they go to the police. Why is it like that? They go to the police station and start telling the police officer like everything that happened. And so the police officer's like, okay, we need to go and bring him in. When they go to, then we cut to Nate's perspective. He goes in the kitchen. There's a rotten pumpkin in the spot where Eve was killed, and he was like, so he's like, oh no. So then he like quickly rushes to the pumpkin patch. When he gets there, lo and behold, hole's empty. The hole's empty. Cut to Eve's perspective, we find out that she didn't die the 2 times they tried to kill her. And then she realised she was being buried alive. But of course, as we know, Addie didn't fully fill in the hole because she wanted to go and find Nate. So she just did a thin layer of mud and then put leaves on the top. So Eve basically waited, and when she was sure that they weren't there anymore, she managed to finally get herself out. And then of course the phone and everything was with her. She was able to get it, but there was no cell signal. So what did she do? She had to walk for ages. She gets signal, she calls. Who does she call? Her little side ting shoe shop man, Jay, right? He quickly comes and he collects her again, doesn't ask too many questions, but eventually he takes her to the shoe shop. Of course he does. Says you can have any pair of shoes you want. This sis almost died. Why are you giving her shoes? Anyway, twice, 3 times if you count the burying alive. This sis almost died 3 times in 24 hours. Anyway, and she's like, can you help me? And now we know they were planning the haunting, the crow, I didn't even say the reason he realizes because the raven came into the house, and Eve was the only one that knew that his favorite poem was The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. And so he was like, I need to go and check if she's actually dead. Of course she wasn't. Anyway, now we cut back to the pumpkin patch. He's there and he's like, oh my god, the hole's empty. Then what happens? He gets hit around the back of the head with a frying pan. A frying pan? I don't know, something. And then they tie him up, or so, I think they must tie him up, put him in the hole, and then Eve's like, I'm gonna bury him alive. And then Jay's like, are you sure? By the way, he's staying out of the way because he doesn't want to be seen. But then she goes, yeah, and then he's like, okay, I'll help you. So then what do? They bury him alive. Dun dun dun. And then anyway, what happens then is, we're almost at the end now. Then Eve just magically reappears and pretends that she got on a bus to get away from her husband because she found out that he was grooming children. And so then the police officer was like, but what about Addie's story? But Addie, like, even though Addie's told them the whole, like, her whole spiel about she hit even on the head with the frying pan, if the victim has come back and said, like, nah, that didn't happen, like, what are they supposed to do? Nothing, right? And then they're all just under the impression that Nate's on the run because he was almost caught, but really Nate is dead in a pumpkin patch. I don't know why they didn't go and check this is a plot hole. I don't know why they didn't go and this is just one of the plot holes of this book, why they didn't go and check the pumpkin patch, because obviously they know about the pumpkin patch because Addie knows about the pumpkin patch. So that's crazy, to be honest, why they didn't even go and look. not very good policing there, but it is what it is. Anyway, epilogue, we find out that now Hudson and Addie are friends again, but it might be more than friends, we're not sure. But anyway, so he's gonna drive her home, he's saying bye to his football friends, then they go, bye Jay. To see where this is going. And then Addie's like, why do they call you Jay? And he's like, oh, you know, because like we all call each other by our surnames, and Jabkowski or whatever is really hard to say. And she's like, oh, okay. And then they sit in the car, and then what happens on Hudson's phone? He gets a snap flash, his message. He opens it, he does a little smile, his little cheeky. And then this whole time we knew that Hudson was potentially speaking to another girl, but like nobody knew who it was. And then Addie's like, oh, who's that? And then he's like, oh, just this girl just this woman that I was seeing, and she's just gone through a really rough time, but she's doing better now. Have you clocked who it is? So essentially this whole time she was having an affair also with a high school student, but apparently she didn't know. Like, how big is this school? Also, he's the quarterback. How is she not clocked? Or did she clock and she didn't know? But this whole time, she, from Eve's perspective, to in her defense, even though I don't think I should be defending her, she was convinced that he had a wife and a child, because he always heard like a baby crying, and also somebody had called him, and he'd said, oh, I love you, I'll be home soon, like that kind of thing. Turns out he's saying I love you to his mom, and the 1-year-old that was crying is his brother. Anyway, yeah, so essentially she was also having an affair with a child. I mean, they're at school. I don't know how old he is, but I'm assuming he's the same age as Addie, which means he's either 16 or 17, maybe at a push 18, but even still, teacher, student. Again, clearly he must not be her student because she didn't recognise him, but he's a quarterback. You're at the school, you must know. Like, I'm just so confused. Anyway, that was it. That was... I'm glad you now have that useless information in your brain as well. Good night.